All right, we are trying something really ambitious today. And I say we, and I mean me, but we're on this whole thing together, right? So we're going we, either way. This is Evan Altman. I am the host of both the Deep Like Leviathan podcast, which I am recording right now via this microphone, so I can't see my pretty face as well. For those who are watching live, not really live, but you're watching on Inside Corner, which is my YouTube show. So we're going to do these both together. Turn this to the side, kind of like move the mic around, right? Wanted to record these together for the simple fact that I just watched Avengers Endgame last night and wanted to give my review of it, wanted to tie some things together, and rather than try to set these things up and, come up with different thoughts and have them split up, I figured, what the hell, let's just try running this at the same time. Now, whether you are watching or listening, or maybe both, right? I would hope that you're not watching with the volume off. This has spoilers. This is not spoiler free. I will be revealing some of the things that happen in the movie Avengers Endgame. So if you have not seen it, and if you plan to see it, and you do not want to be disappointed, or you do not want to know what happens, stop listening, stop watching, go to the theater, come back in 3 hours and 1 minute, and then we can kind of discuss further. And the movie is 3 hours and 1 minute long, right? So a couple little things just in case. Again, I will say, I'm going to spoil some things. So if you haven't watched, please don't watch this. Took the kids. So I'm going to go through this. I tweeted out a thread of this stuff a while back. And this, I want to say, when did I do that? I want to make sure this mic is on. This mic is on, right? Yeah, it's definitely on, because then I muted it. All right, now I'm not even going to go back in and edit that out. So, long story short, I won't take too much time because I really want to get into it, but so I grew up in a really rural area, right? Tiny town, 1,500 people, but we weren't even in the town. We were like 10 miles outside. And there was like one movie theater in another town in which I was born. So I was born in Winamac, Indiana. Had a Winamac address for a long time, but we went to school and we're in the school district of North Judson, Indiana, which is like this massive school district. And you put it in an actual city, it'd be like the biggest school in the world. But, excuse me, I mean, we're talking like 15 miles in every direction. But we had this one movie theater any place, and so we didn't go a lot. My mom was a nurse, did a lot of home health care stuff. My dad was a farmer until I was about 10, and he went back to school, became a teacher. But we did not have a lot of time to go to movies, and I think we certainly weren't hand to mouth by any stretch, but my parents didn't spend a lot on maybe frivolous things, if we want to call it that. So for me, movies were like a special event, and so that's kind of how I got into that. And I will vividly remember for the rest of my life, my parents went to see Ghostbusters when it came out, and they bought my brother and I this book, like one of those picture books you get, like more for kids. It had pictures of the movie, like still shots and stuff. And they bought us these Ghostbusters shirt. I had a black one, my brother had a white one, I think, or the other way around. And we were so into it, and I remember going for them taking us to see the movie, right, when we were kids. And so there were other stories that I won't get into too much of it, but I really, really, because of that and because of how that worked, I love the theater going experience. I love to see movies, especially action movies, big blockbusters. Not so much comedies, although those are more fun when there's other people laughing with you. Definitely not the dramas or things like. I want to see action type exciting movies, right, that are really going to be enhanced by the larger visual experience, by the sound, right, the audio that's there, by the audience being around you, and everyone kind of having this shared experience of a movie together. And so I love taking my kids to these. And when the first Avengers movie came out, so this would have been in 2012, my daughter was not yet 6, so she was like 5, almost 5.5. My son was 3.5. Okay, so these are little, right? Most people would think it's really stupid to take a 3.5 and a 5.5-year-old to really any movie, let alone one that's like 2.5 hours long, let alone in 3 dimensions. And so, but that was the timing of it, and I wanted to pick, because I wanted to see it right away. It was on a Friday. Picked them both up from preschool. We go to the theater. We put the glasses on, and I'm not kidding you. From the moment the glasses went on, neither of them moved. Neither of them spoke. I mean, they were just rapt watching this movie. And ever since then, we've gone to see all of the subsequent films together. I think my son didn't go to see Thor. Maybe did Thor come out before? I'm trying to, I don't remember all, but we definitely, all four of us have seen. I know we all went to Thor Ragnarok, Black Panther, and a couple other ones, but definitely all the Avengers movies, right? And so this has been this really cool thing for us. So we went to see Avengers Endgame, and we saw Infinity War and Endgame both at the White River State Park IMAX, downtown Indianapolis, which is one of the, you see the IMAX theaters, right, that are on the end of the little deal of the regular theater. And those screens are big, they're cool, but I mean, this thing is massive, right? Just monstrous. And the only thing that sucks is you lean back in your seat and you're going to be banging the elbows of the person behind you. And the dude who was sitting immediately behind me was incredibly high. So he came in about 15 minutes late. He's using his phone light to find his seat, which is weird because the whole thing was packed. There's like one empty seat, dude. And I mean, it smelled as if he was with Nick Cage and Eric Stoltz in Fast Times at Ridgemont High, and had just like walked out of the van. Just there was like a cloud around him, right? And hey, I don't care, if you want to get blazed, that's cool. But I was like, oh, dude. I mean, it was just kind of, I mean, obviously it was dank, right? But then the dude was like sniffling and snuffling the whole time. He's moving his feet around. He's kicking my seat constantly. So it was less that he was clearly smelling of pot and more that he was kicking my seat that was aggravating. Anyway, that aside, fantastic experience. Just awesome. And I think my son and I are going to go see it again tomorrow because I'm still trying to process all these things. But the emotion that I felt when the opening started to roll, we got applause. When different characters, here come the spoilers, when the snap happened, when Hulk snapped first, obviously with the Infinity Gauntlet, with the stones, and brought everyone back. We didn't see them back right away. We didn't know they were back yet. So when Thanos unleashes his army, and then all of a sudden you start seeing the sling ring circles appear, and then T'Challa comes out, and Spider-Man, and the rest of the banished heroes who had been dusted in the Snapocalypse, all of a sudden are back, and people are just cheering, right, applauding each time a new character comes out, and you see this stuff all happening. But just to feel that. But I know I stared. So let me back up just a bit. I'm not going to go through the entire movie, but I want to hit on a couple of big points, and I want to tie this back into the Cubs because the video cast in particular is related to that. Actually what's cool about doing this pod as I'm recording is I can actually see how long it is, which is really helpful because normally I go too long. And I'm sorry, my posture's jacked up. I'm just holding the mic and all that. So anyway, the first hour to hour and a half was definitely a little slow. It absolutely dragged a little. And I don't mean like in a bad way, but there was a lot of setup, right? And a lot of kind of putting paid to some of these characters and sort of taking them on this journey that we were able to sort of see full circle where they had come from and why. And it was an homage to them in many different ways. It really went back to whether it was Thor, whether it was Captain America, whether it was Iron Man in particular, and even Black Widow and Hawkeye. There was this idea of kind of redemption was a huge part of it. Going back to the past and maybe righting some things that were wrong. If you think of Tony Stark and the daddy issues he had and kind of being able to lay those down and put those to rest. Captain America and Love Lost, things like that. And so we saw this all sort of set up, and it drove for each of those characters their motivation, right? Because we see all this stuff about, they're superheroes and they have powers and they fight bad guys. Okay, cool. But who were they, as, and I don't even want to say humans because they're not all human, but where did their motivation lie? Why did they do what they did? Why did they drive themselves and keep fighting against what seemed like insurmountable odds, right? And so was interesting is it starts with that battle with Thanos, right? But he's almost dead at that point, and then it seemed like really anticlimactic. So like, okay, cool, movie's over, 10 minutes in. But then how they go about it, and there were some overarching things. I will say this, and I'm not going to go through every point, but for me, and I'm sure everyone will have a different answer for this, but as I watched it, and of course the final battle, right, with and I kind of feel like the battle in Infinity War, the scope of it and the way it went through with the battle for New York, right, in Avengers, I think may have been bigger, and maybe even more dramatic in the actual, in terms of the battle and the scope and kind of how they all played out. But this one, in terms of having all the characters there, right, and having all of them sharing the same battlefield, not split across different areas, was incredible. And the women, man, the girl power, right? My daughter looked over and she was so excited at that part, and it was really neat, I thought, for her to be able to see that, and for I'm sure there are some men out there who were displeased by that, and you guys can go pound sand if that's the case, but it was super cool to see that and to have them all there and assembled and just kicking ass, right? But for me, the thing that I've been waiting for throughout this entire process was for Captain America to hold Mjolnir, right? Thor's hammer, which he had gotten back because of when he went back in time. So that was kind of cool to see it. And so to see Cap raise his hand and for Mjolnir to come in there and for him to grab it, I was staring with, like, no, I'm not even being hyperbolic. My jaw dropped. I stared at it with my mouth open when that happened, and I made some exclamations. I may have cursed. I don't remember. I clapped, and then to see him fight Thanos with Mjolnir, and at one point he had Stormbreaker, and to see Thor wield them as well, to see Professor Hulk, all these things kind of being brought in, and I was just, man, it was so emotional, and in such a great way. But then, you had this realization, right, when you see. And Doctor Strange had told Tony Stark, right? He saw the 14,600,003 or 603 or however many, 14 million plus outcomes, and there was only one in which they won. And Iron Man asked him, "Is this the one?" And Strange says, "If I tell you, it won't be," or something along those lines, right? And as they're kind of in this climactic moment, Tony looks over to Strange, and Strange just raises his index finger. For one, this is the one, and Tony knew at that point what he had to do. And so again, if you've seen it, you know how that ends up, and so Iron Man dies, but that scene, because Thanos had said earlier at the very beginning when they fought him, "I am inevitable," and that was really telling because he's at the present day, but then but of course, if you're, it's not like I'm giving anything away. He was able to see the future when they went back to the past, because he saw it through Nebula, who was because of her computer brain, together on all those things, and so he was able to see that and see himself say that. And so then when he thought he had the gauntlet again, he said to Tony again, "I am inevitable," and he tried to snap, but then he realized that Tony had swapped out his glove, and so then Tony pulls it up, picks the thing up, and says, "I am Iron Man." Boom. And we had seen what happened to the previous characters who snapped with the glove, and so you knew, whether it be Thanos or Hulk, they had the strength to survive that. Tony Stark did not, and that led to his passing. And I think it was tough for people to see. And I'm no joke, like, I'm not afraid to admit it all. I cried, like, not openly weeping and bawling, but I mean, I had tears, and I had to wipe them away. And I got more tears again when Captain America turned over his shield to Falcon. But I look over, my daughter's crying. I mean, she's covering her face, and my son is tearing up as well, and you could hear people sniffling through the audience. But what was interesting about it, I said, well, why did he have to die? And part of it is because of the story arc. Part of it's because that's where it began. It began with Iron Man. It began with Tony Stark. And so to end it with his death was fitting. But I think more than that, there's the idea that he was so driven and so manic kind of in his pursuit of really anything that the only way for him to stop being Iron Man was for him to die. He was not going to be able to walk away. And so I'm not saying, it was a good thing, oh, you had to kill him, but that was really the only way that he could be at rest, because he never really truly stopped. And that was really the only thing. So, and then Captain America, again, getting to go back and live the life that he missed out on because of being trapped in the ice for 70 years, was awesome. But again, when I talked to my kids, so we're driving home, and I talked to them, I said, I think there's a lesson in this for you guys, and this is like me being dad, but in the same way. So you saw how the Avengers, their plot or their plan to reverse everything was to go back, not to face Thanos head on, because they really couldn't, and he had his head off, as a matter of fact, but was to go back and kind of sneak back through time, right? So we had the Back to the Future, and it was totally self-aware. Like, there was a ton of self-awareness in the movie, the whole Back to the Future 2 thing. But to go back in time to pluck the stones out of those individual times when they knew where they were, to assemble them and stop things. But they were never really facing the problem, because, as Thanos said, he was inevitable. There was no way to avoid him. And yet they tried to avoid him and tried to kind of do a workaround. And at the end, they had to face him at his full strength with his full army and the potential might of the Infinity Gauntlet filled with the stones. So try as they might, they could not escape what was inevitable, even though they tried. And because maybe they tried all these different things and ways to kind of work around him, it ended up being a bigger problem than it would have been in the first place. And so I kind of talked to my kids about that, right? Like, if you're facing a problem, face it head on, own it, deal with it. And don't just try to dance around it, because in the end, you're going to come back and it's going to be worse than usual. But if we tie in the Cubs angle, and I'm running on a little over 17 minutes, so I do want to make this quick. I thought about this, and I've talked about this on here. I think not on Leviathan, but on Inside Corner, about how, for me, watching the Cubs, and I think maybe some of you will agree, the 2015 season was actually more enjoyable in terms of just pure, unadulterated fun. The Cubs 2015 season, because we didn't know what to expect from them. We didn't really know. It was the first we had really seen them come into their own. And similarly, Infinity War gave us the idea of Thanos as a full villain. He had been kind of the big bad in the background. We saw the Infinity Gauntlet. We saw the stones. There was that iconic image of the snap. There were so many heroes all sharing screen time. And they had all really been together. So we didn't really know what to expect. How are they going to pull this off? Is it really going to work? What's going to happen? And, I think that is a movie that I've watched, I don't know how many times since. And it's just so enjoyable all the way through, because you really didn't know what to expect, and it was so fun. Then the 2016 season comes around. The Cubs are favored to win the World Series. There's a ton of expectation. And so you had this long period of run-up where, at times, okay, this is cool. It's setting the stage for some things. We're watching this play out, but let's get to the end. What's going to happen? How is this going to work? And the payoff was obviously was worth it. They won the World Series. It worked out. But it was more businesslike. It was an expected conclusion to this incredibly long journey and very detailed journey. And so in that sense, I felt like Endgame was very much like the 2016 Cubs season, because there was just a tremendous amount of build up to it, a tremendous amount of hype. Everyone wanted to see it. Everyone wanted to be a part of this story. And yet when it's done, it came at a price. I think we all sacrificed a lot. A lot of us, I cried at the end of the World Series, just like I cried near the end of Endgame. But we had to lose some beloved characters. We had to lose some of that innocence in that, a lot of it, you just kind of felt like, oh, he snapped them out of existence. They all come back. Everybody's fine, right? And in the same sense, kind of as Cubs fans, ever since then, we've lost that innocence and that kind of childlike adoration, maybe not all of us. And if you're one of those people who didn't, bully for you. Like, that's awesome. And I applaud you for that, because a lot of people did not. And so, again, that's what I was deeply satisfied by Endgame. I wasn't able to sleep until like 2 a.m. The movie got over about 11. And I'm still, there's so many things running through my head. There's so many things I want to watch again. But just to see those characters all come full circle, and these characters and these things, and again, I'm kind of saying this about the Cubs as well, to see something that as a child you grew up watching or reading, and wanting to see realized to the fullest extent. And as a kid, we talked about comic books, and me and my buddies, and we knew that there wasn't really a good way to make the movies about them because they just could not be displayed realistically and really faithfully on the screen. And with these latest, all these Marvel movies, they've been able to do that convincingly, to make you feel that they are real, to be there and to see that happen, and to see something like the Infinity War and Thanos and the Stones and all of that come together. Just like to see the Chicago Cubs play in and win the World Series was something that even as children we normally couldn't dream of. Maybe we could dream about it, but then we didn't think it would happen. I mean, I sat there and said repeatedly in the wake of that last out, Rizzo's putting the ball in his pocket, and I just stared at the screen and said, this was never supposed to happen. Because I realized in that moment, I truly had never allowed myself to believe that it ever would. And for that to be realized and to be able to bear witness to that, just like I was able to bear witness to my favorite characters, and that's kind of what I felt like when Cap caught Mjolnir. That was Anthony Rizzo catching the throw from Chris Bryant that almost sailed. That was this moment that I had envisioned in my mind from the comics, that then to see that happen, because Captain America has always been my favorite, even though I'm wearing my Hulk shirt here. Hulk's probably my second favorite. But to see that and to have this thought of something and watch it play out, and to be able to share it with my kids too, like that was really, I mean, that is the coolest thing to me. As a dad and establishing that bond and kind of doing that stuff, it was so neat. And so I hope all of you, and I know not all of you will feel the same way about it. I'm sure some of you probably went to Endgame and were kind of like, meh, okay. But I just took so much out of that. And, I think that's kind of where Marvel's going to go now in the future, is sort of where we're at with the Cubs, right? Where we're going to parse these things. We're going to break this stuff down. We're going to wish that they were able to meet the standard that was set by Infinity War and Endgame. And I don't know that that's ever possible. Maybe it's not. Maybe it's and realistically, it's not, because this was the culmination of this entire phase and everything that 22 or 23 movies have been driving toward. And so once that's done and you move on from that, you are different. It is different. There's no way to completely recapture that. Now, that doesn't mean things can't be good in the future. And by all means, they certainly can. I don't think Red Sox fans are upset about winning more World Series titles, but there's something special about that one. And so to see that all come to an end, to have that journey conclude, to see Stan Lee there and just everything that this whole deal means, again, was really, really special for me. I'm super stoked about it. I'm excited to go see it again, to maybe pick up some of those little things that I didn't the first time. And again, I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. I'd love to hear about it from you. And since I'm recording both of these, I am going to tie this up. And the DLL listeners, both of you who have not seen Inside Corner, know that I normally am having a beer during these recordings. I am not today because it's it's about 5 hours earlier than I usually record these. And I'm actually heading to a wedding reception after this. And I just got back from the gym not too long ago. So I figure probably not great to have one. I promise next time I will drink a beer. This is kind of a special edition. It's a little bit different. And I wouldn't have been drinking anyway because I've been talking really fast for like the last 24 minutes. So with that, I will bid you adieu. But please, if you are listening to the podcast, if you have the opportunity, we're available on Apple iTunes, Google Podcasts, Stitcher. So go on there, give me a 5-star review, even if you think it sucks, because that helps. For those of you who are watching on YouTube, thank you very much. And again, it won't really make sense to you to watch or listen to both of these, but my pod, Deep Like Leviathan, is definitely non-Cubs related stuff, or it's been about at least 50-50. And I brought this up before. It's a lyric from a Wu-Tang Clan song, or specifically an Inspector Deck song. But again, really happy to have you folks with me and to kind of follow me along with this journey, or to be on it with me. I don't want to say follow. I'm not leading you. Ideally, we're just kind of on this thing together and hanging out. And I really appreciate you reading my work over at Cubs Insider. I love that you're watching the videos, listening to the pods from time to time, and I thank you for that. And I look forward to the next time. So until then, this is Evan Altman, and my technique of speech is deep like Leviathan.